One of the key points raised at that press conference was the issue of Cuban political prisoners. Joining us live now from Washington, D.C. is Marion Smith, who is the Executive Director of the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation. Thanks so much for being with us on the programme. Tell us a little bit more about the type of people, the kind of people who at the moment are being held as political prisoners, if you like, in Cuba.
Right. Well, today in the press conference, we heard more about the imperfections of the United States than we've heard about the human rights crimes of the Castro regime. President Raul Castro continued to deny the existence of political prisoners, but our organization has provided a list of at least 51 individuals, artists, journalists, average citizens who simply want to live a life that is free. And sometimes that includes exercising a God-given right to free speech. And for that, they are imprisoned because they are viewed as a threat, an existential threat to the Castro regime. But in his remarks, President Castro stated that if someone could provide him a list, as we have done, that he would see that those prisoners are released by midnight tonight. And we are going to do everything we can with our friends in Cuba to ensure that President Raul Castro remains true to his word.
I know your organisation is in fact opposed to the US normalising relations with Cuba, but surely the fact that that question was raised at a press conference where the US President and the Cuban President were there, surely that is a step in the right direction, isn't it?
Did we hear an admission that there were political prisoners in Cuba?
No, but the question was asked, and as you pointed out, you're going to furnish the President with a list of those political prisoners.
Well, we'll see what the government's response is to this call for the release of political prisoners. But yesterday, some 300 people were violently arrested by Castro's forces. And they are forces that are intended to keep the island of Cuba, which could be described, of course, as a giant prison, to keep them silent. It is unclear whether or not the people of Cuba would vote for the Castro brothers if there was a free and fair election held today. And so for a single-party dictatorship, free speech is an existential threat.
Surely, though, the US has far more chance of influencing what happens in Cuba if it does have relationships with that country.
Well, Cuba has enjoyed diplomatic relationships with Canada and a host of European countries, democracies all. They've had millions of tourists from these countries go to Cuba. What good has been done? What we are afraid of, and what we hear from our friends, dissidents, pro-democracy activists in Cuba, is that the United States, for many decades, has been the only major force in the world who is their ally, representing the interest of the people of Cuba, as opposed to the Communist Party of Cuba. And many of them feel now that this move by the United States, where we have not used our leverage to get a single economic or political reform from the Castro government. They haven't even promised that they would do anything. In fact, they've promised that nothing will change. Raul Castro has made statements that Cuba is going to be just as committed to its revolutionary ideology as it always has been. Just on the eve of President Obama's visit to Cuba, the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Cuba announced that together with the People's Republic of China, they remain committed to the irreversibility of socialism. And
right.
For the Castros, that's code word for dictatorship.
But isn't the reality that the Castro brothers aren't going to be around for that much longer? Both very old, of course. And isn't it good for the US to be involved in Cuba before the Castro brothers are no longer part of the political process?
That would be true if this depended only on the personality of two individuals. But what the Castro brothers have done is build up a corrupt regime where the party, the military, and family members and henchmen control the political and the economic machinery of the island of Cuba. And, I'm afraid that by the United States trying to open up Western business opportunities and access to capital, we've conferred both legitimacy and now money to prop up a party that, frankly, is more likely to stay in power now after Raul and Fidel Castro are off the scene than they were 2 years ago.
Great to have you with us on the program. Marion Smith joining us there from Washington, D.C. Thanks so much. Thank you.